Hello folks, I'm glad that you joined me here on the channel today, and I appreciate you coming back time after time. It always surprises me that you're here, but I'm really delighted. So today I'm going to work on another canning recipe, as several of you have asked for more canning recipes. Today I'm going to can some meatballs in different ways, and I hope that you will hang in there while I do that. I'm also working on other things around the kitchen today, so you may get bells and whistles as things come along. So I hope that's not too distracting. I will get set up and I'll see you back here in a minute. Thank you. Well, here I am back, and this is fairly simple actually to make a meatball recipe that you can can. I'm going to add about 2 pounds of lean ground hamburger. I would have preferred to have gotten the regular hamburger, but they didn't have any at the store today, so you work with what you have. I am also going to add to this 2 pounds. It's going to make quite a lot. 2 pounds of pork burger. Now you could definitely leave the pork out. That's entirely up to you. I'm just going to wash my hands. Now folks, normally if I was just cooking around the house, I wouldn't put gloves on to mix hamburger. I'd just wash my hands really good. But for the past few days, I've been doing a lot of gardening. And you know what that's like. You can never really be sure that you've got your fingernails as clean as they should be. And we don't need to be bringing in any bacteria from the dirt and mixing it in with our meat when we're working so hard to preserve it and keep it safe for us. So into this bowl, I'm not even going to start mixing it right away, but I am going to add some dehydrated, I get into the package. I'm going to add dehydrated minced onions because I like the flavor of them. Oh, I'm not measuring, am I? Oh, I'll try to do better. So in there, I've probably added a third to a half of a cup of minced onions. And now I'm going to add about a scant tablespoon of garlic powder. Hope everybody's day is going really good. It's pouring down rain where I live, so it's a perfect day to be doing something like this. I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons of just plain table salt. Now there's a lot of different thoughts about meatballs and canning meatballs and whether or not you should or shouldn't add eggs to them, or whether you should or shouldn't add oatmeal or breadcrumbs to them. And you know, that is up to you, your own preference in it. There is probably, I would go to a good cookbook or a good canning book and follow their guidelines if you're new at it. I think some of us that have been doing it for years do it the way we do it because we've had good success and no problems with it. So I'm going to mix up this hamburger today, and I'm going to put some eggs into it, and I think in this much I'll probably put 4 eggs just to help me bind it together. And then I'm going to divide it up because I have plans for 2 different meatballs today. And breaking my own rules about breaking it over top of the plate. Try and make sure you don't get any shells in it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like that. Big chunk. Okay, And then I'm just going to mix it through, but I'm not going to over mix it. And of course, I guess you can tell how short I am back here. This is very high. We'll get her done. We do indeed like this mix that we use of pork and beef. It seems to do us very well. Now, if I was doing this fresh for dinner tonight, I would certainly have added some sort of breadcrumb or oatmeal to this to just stretch it a little farther, and it does help it to hold up too. But we're going to be very tender with these today. One of the things you can definitely do to hamburgers, over mix it. So I think that's pretty good right there. So I'm going to get to town building meatballs, and I am doing them in pint jars today, so that's something to keep in mind. I don't want my meatballs to be huge, but also they will shrink some in the oven, and then they will shrink again in the jar during the canning process. So it's kind of a fine balance. I'm going to do them in pint jars today because it's just my husband and I now, and I think I've always done them in quart jars, and then it seems like we have leftovers. Now, there's not a thing wrong with that because Gino doesn't mind taking them in his lunch as a leftover. And let's face it, there's a lot of things you can do with meatballs. But for this purpose right here today, I'm just going to do them, that's a big one. I'm going to do them in pint jars and see how we fare with those. I may do actually some of each and just test that theory out and see what's going to work for us best. So I'm going to carry on getting these made. Again, you don't want to press them too hard. So I don't know about you guys, but I have quite a number of recipes that I could use meatballs in, or I have quite a number of recipes for meatballs. So one of the ones I'm going to do today is like a saucy meatball, and I'm not sure where this recipe came from originally, but I've definitely seen it on Pinterest and other areas on the old internet. So I don't feel like I'm taking anybody's family secrets, although at our house we call these Uncle Gino's meatballs because he is the one who made them the first time, and they're quite a family favorite, so we definitely will do saucy meatballs, and then I might do some with a little pasta sauce in them. The thing that you have to be careful about here, if you're canning with a sauce on, is making sure that you're doing everything as hot as you possibly can, because you need the internal temperature of the jar to reach a high point. Now sometimes I just dry can meatballs too, and that way you can determine what you're going to do. Now when I say dry can, I cook them all first and then I put them in the jar with no liquid, and that way they don't take on any other flavor and you can flavor them as you go along. I'm talking my way right through this, aren't I? But if you're looking to have quick and easy meals that you can just pull out of the cupboard and warm up, then I do a couple with sauces on them. And again, this is probably not something that would be recommended to put a heavy sauce onto it, so I don't. I kind of lighten it up a bit. But the sauce, when the meatballs are cooked in the sauce, it just seems to add so much more flavor, and it's how we like them, and like I said, it's how we've been doing them for years. So I think that some of the newer Canning companies are recognizing that people are doing this anyway, and they're trying to adjust the guidelines. I read a really interesting article about the canning guidelines, and one of the things that I read was that the reason that it's still, some of these things are still guidelines that have been guidelines since 1900, isn't that it's because it's the safest way to do it. It's because they've never had the money to carry out the testing to find out if there was a different way that would work. So at-home cooks are sometimes pushing the limits, and they're just trying it out anyway, and they're thinking that, you know, if you can can a stew, why can't you can meatballs and with sauce on them? So it's not necessarily a matter of them not being safe. It's just simply a matter of the companies who set the standards not having the ability to run the test to make sure that things are safe. So I'm not saying that's a fact, so don't take me at my, don't take that to be gospel or anything, because I don't know that for sure. But I have read it, and it makes sense when you look at the guidelines and when the last time they were changed. We have much better equipment today than when the guidelines were put down. We have a lot more consciousness around the quality of food that we're canning. You know, in 1900, when some of those guidelines were brought out, they had no pressure canners, and they would cook something like a meatball in a pot, would cook all day long. I don't know, 6 to 8 hours or something like that. Well, our equipment today with our pressure canners allows us to do that in, you know, pretty short order. You can cook a whole quart jars full of meat in 90 minutes in a pressure canner. So that is how quickly it can go. Now, it looks like I might have one huge meatball here because I'm down to the end of it. That'll probably be my lunch, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm gonna put it on the tray. Now I'm gonna put this tray in the oven. It's just a baking sheet that I have lined with parchment paper, and I'm going to put it in the oven for about 12 to 14 minutes at 400 degrees. And when it's ready, I will be right back, and we'll carry on with the next part of this. Now, while the meatballs are cooking in the oven, I am going to work on the sauce. And what I have here in the bowl is about 1.5 cups of ketchup with 1/2 cup of water, because I want to thin it down a little. And I have 2 cups of brown sugar. Now I'm just going to make sure this is stirred up really good first. That's our oven beeping, so I'm just going to grab that. I had a peek in there, and I don't think they're quite ready, so we're going to leave them for a couple more minutes. So while I am busy stirring this, I'm going to add to this mixture some smoke, liquid smoke. Now, there are people who say you should not use this in your canning, but we have, and are very satisfied with it. So I'm just going to add a couple of drops, maybe 4 drops, and also some Lee and Perrin's Worcestershire sauce. Just a cup, maybe about a tablespoon, and some garlic powder. I'm going to add about 1/2 teaspoon. I'm just going to put it into the palm in there. And I don't normally add salt to this because I don't think that it needs it. It's pretty flavorful on its own. Now, because I'm going to be working today with hot meat that's going into a hot canner, I am definitely going to heat this sauce up, and I'm just going to throw it in the microwave to do that. Make sure that it's hot so that we're starting with everything really warm today. Hello again. So Here I am back with the cooked meatballs, and you might notice that the jar size has changed here. So when I started to look at the size of these meatballs and the fact that they did not shrink very much, I decided I would go with a quart jar instead. So the leftovers I had talked about earlier, we will definitely be able to have some. And I'm just going to fill these jars. I'll get 2 full jars of this batch. And with any luck, 1 or 2 left for each. There we go. Now you can see there's quite a bit of space inside the jar. That's good. There's lots of places for the sauce to go, but it's also a good way to make sure that your jars are not packed too tight with meat, to ensure that we're going to get the sauce all the way to the center of the jar. Now, I'm not going to fill the sauce all the way to the top of the jar because I feel like the meatballs still have some of their own juice to let off. So I'm going to do that for the time being. I'm going to clean off these jar tops carefully and make sure that I get everything off. If we have clean ones, you could add vinegar to your rag, which I think I will do. And just ensure that there's no grease particles left behind that would cause you any kind of problem with your seal. And then on goes the lid and the ring, just that tight. You don't want to over tighten them. I probably would under normal, well, maybe I'm going to go back and do that anyway. I'll just double check and make sure there's no air trapped in there. I have to get me a plastic one for this because glass is easily scored, and we think about it being tough. There's a lot of things that can cause our expensive jars to break, including scoring them too many times with a knife or a spoon. So don't get in there and rattle around. It causes the glass to weaken, and it could cause your jar to fail. You don't want to have any additional air in there. So I think that one's good and ready for the canner. And here comes number 2. Now I've got a couple of different sized jars. I bought these Bernardin kind of fancy jars. It's got pictures and fruit on it. But for me that means that 4 of them will not fit into the Nesco small batch canner because it is a tight space and there's not quite enough room for 4 of them. Now, if you get the square style ones made by Care, 4 of them will go into the canner. But where I live, you can't always, you don't always have those choices or those options of shopping for different kinds of jars. And if you're lucky, you could be watching the garage sales at this time of the year and maybe find yourself some jars at a garage sale. Those are always great finds. Okay, I think that one's good as well. I think we might be a little light on the sauce, so I'm just going to add a little more water to it. We'll see how we make out. And pretty good, but I'm going to do it a shot more. Now you don't even have to add any kind of fanciness to these. You could just add beef broth, which I got some out as well just in case I needed it, but you can just add water to them while they're in the jar, and that way they're not flavored and you can use them for anything you like. So I'm going to put this one in. I've got 2 jars. I probably have enough for a 3rd jar, but I think we're going to reserve that back for lunch. And I will just get you a little closer so you can see what I'm doing over here with the canner. And yeah, 2 jars. That's one of the wonderful things about the Nesco canner is that you can can with just a small amount in the canner. Because there's only 2 in there and I don't like to run a canner that's not full, I'm going to add a jar of water, and I'm just going to take an imperfect lid, like the ring doesn't have to be particularly good, and I'm going to take the ring and I'm going to fill it full of water and add it to the canner. Now you might be curious as to why we would add a jar of water to the canner. The reason for that is these canners are tested. These canners are tested with a full load in them. So if they're going to be accurate and the directions that we're getting from the canning manufacturer is going to be accurate, we need to make sure that we are running our canners with full loads, because that's how they test them, so that we know about our safety that way. So into the canner, I'm just going to put the lid down. I did say I was going to bring you closer, but I think you're okay there. I'm going to close the lid down. I'm going to make sure that my canner is set on exhaust, and I chose this particular electric small batch canner because I live at a high altitude and I needed to be able to set it for 15 pounds, and all of the other ones that I researched would only work for 10 pounds. So 10 pounds is for lower altitude and 15 for higher. So I'm going to stop the warming process in there, and I'm going to go to high pressure, and my time, because I'm with quartz, I'm going to go to 90 minutes. And I'm going to hit start. And we have a couple of delicious meals in there with leftovers for the next day. And I will see you again on the next video. Until then, take care, and I'll see you soon.